Back, and good afternoon, everyone. Happy Sabbath, and hello to all those that are on the webcast. In less than 5 weeks from now, we will have reached the 14th of Nisan and on the Judean calendar. As you know, between now and then, we'll have vanquished all leavening from our homes, prepared our hearts, and allowed a sacrificial lamb to sleep at the foot of our bed for 4 nights. Of course, I say that in jest, but a couple thousand years ago, God gave a command for his people to do something that was simple on the surface, but rather unique and extraordinary in meaning. Let's start this afternoon by turning our Bibles to Exodus chapter 12 to read this account. Exodus 12. Again, this is God's command communicated to Aaron and Moses directly while the children of Israel were held captive in Egypt, and they had just witnessed 9 devastating plagues. Exodus 12, and we'll start reading in verse 3. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, every man shall take for himself a lamb, according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the persons. According to each man's need, you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight. Now, in using the lens of our present age, we might only see lamb chops or a leg of lamb as variety that we're adding to our usual fare. Yet this was not the case in ancient times. Only kings might have meat on their tables daily. Lower classes relied heavily on grains in their daily diet. Now, for what it's worth, one Bible commentary by Jamieson, Fawcett, and Brown pointed out that the household sizes were much bigger back then. And for the first Passover, they estimated that each family member's portion of meat amounted to roughly the size of an olive, again, for what it's worth. Either way, God's goal in one meal wasn't to award the Israelites with nourishment. Instead, God in his abundant mercy spared his people from the 10th and final plague. And the lamb or kid was instrumental in this event. Today I want to look at 3 significant details about this physical sacrifice that should give us pause and something to think about as we begin to de-leaven our homes. My title, Qualities of a Lamb. Again, that's qualities of a lamb. First off, the physical Passover sacrifice was to be without blemish. Jewish tradition says that the 4 days leading up to the Passover were ones of inspection, to keep an eye on the young animal and its worthiness as a sacrifice. The Hebrew word translated into without blemish here in verse 5 of Exodus 12 is tamim. That's Tamim. Tamim, it can mean complete, whole, sound, unimpaired, having integrity, or without spot. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 23. And we'll be reading verses 27 and 28 of Matthew 23. In this account, this is by the time that Jesus Christ had come to the earth, the idea of being tamim had been severely twisted. So in Matthew 23, these are Christ's own words on the subject. We'll start in verse 27, like I said. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Verse 28, even so you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Now the religious officials of Jesus' day, and while the temple was still standing in Jerusalem, they had enforced a civic duty that all grave sites were to be clearly marked with lime. This was in preparation for the 3 pilgrimage festivals. The thought was that if a visitor was coming to the temple and accidentally stepped into a tomb, they would be unwittingly defiled. They used the lime to clean off the tombs and make them more visible. Now, instead, Jesus Christ made it plain that we are to be without blemish on the inside, not just in outward appearance. God accepts only that which is tamim, through and through. We are to strive in this way, or as it says in Matthew 5:48, therefore you shall be perfect just as your Father in heaven is perfect. Again, that's Matthew 5:48. Thus, the Passover lamb was unique because it was without blemish. The second quality of the physical Passover sacrifice was that it had to be separated from its flock. Separated. Well, quite obviously, God's holy days and Sabbaths separate us from the world. Extended family and co-workers kind of scratch their heads when we don't make it a point to wear green on St. Patrick's Day or red on Valentine's Day. Spell check on our computers and autocorrect on our smartphones begin to freak out when we use the word de-leavened, or we capitalize the F in feast. Thus, most of the world would say that we are downright strange. And yet, here we are. We should see it as this. God has granted us separation from the world and Satan's pull so that we can be part of his flock. It's easy to take the Sabbath for granted, but whenever we feel the pull of the outside world, let's be sure to realize that we're very fortunate to be here, right now, during God's holy time within these walls. Again, our separation is from the world, and until the rest of mankind is shown the truth, their separation is from God. The Passover lamb was unique because it was separate from its larger flock. Now, the third quality of the Passover sacrifice is that it was a child. Relatively speaking, we're all children. Our Heavenly Father and Elder Brother have always existed, and that's something that really is hard for us to fathom. Even Noah, who lived to be around 950 years old, he was still a child, and I'm sure he was far from complete in God's eyes. Now, this idea of completeness is usually on my mind when we're leading up to the days of unleavened bread. I've come to realize that there's always one or two stubborn places that cannot be completely conquered of leavening. For instance, rivaling only the toaster, we parents know all about the treaded car seats. For Ian and Jenny, and for those who don't know or blocked it out, let me explain. Young kids have a magical ability of sometimes putting crumbs in the most difficult crevices, and child's car seats welcome snacks. I, for one, can attest that I've admirably taken on the vehicle vacuuming and lost miserably. There was always this one shriveled up Cheerio which I could see, and it was smiling back at me, but no vacuum could free it from its stronghold. Let's turn to a short verse on this. It's in Philippians chapter 1. Now, when I gave this sermonette down south, I was informed afterwards that not every brand of cereal O's has leavening in it, but my bad. You get my drift. Philippians chapter 1, and we're going to start in verse 6. Philippians 1, verse 6. Being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. Brethren, we can't get every single molecule of leavening out of our lives, yet we know we must try. But being that we are mortal, our Father in heaven has promised to complete us. He will free that last figurative Cheerio from its car seat abode and grant us a pure spiritual body. Until then, we must show dedication to rid ourselves of what sin we can, because we are still young. And hopefully I've whet your appetite on the symbolism of this physical Passover sacrifice, though it wasn't the focus of my message. We can't underestimate or understate the fact that Jesus Christ was the most perfect sacrifice and that he paid the price for all of mankind. We are only the physical lamb or of the sheep or the kid of the goats, trying to be without sin, unblemished. We are indeed separate from the world. And lastly, we are still young and require Jesus Christ's return to complete our upbringing. Brethren, I'm sure we're doing our due diligence up until now, and I urge us even more so to take these last weeks of self-inspection seriously. In this way, we will be ready to take of the bread and wine in all sincerity and truth.